Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty big.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're going to be digging into potential solutions for global warming. And don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom this time. Our source, Solving Global Warming, a path toward a sustainable future, actually paints a pretty optimistic picture.
That's right. It acknowledges the severity of the issue, no doubt.
I mean, we all know it's serious.
But it also, and I think importantly, emphasizes that we've got the tools and the know-how to really make a difference.
So let's get into it. Where do we even begin with something as massive as global warming?
Well, I think the source makes a really good point right off the bat. It all comes down to energy.
Okay, makes sense.
Think about everything we do, driving, cooking, keeping the lights on. Practically all of it runs on energy from fossil fuels.
Right, and burning those fuels is what releases those greenhouse gases that are warming the planet.
Exactly. So the first step, the big shift, has to be moving away from fossil fuels and transitioning to renewable energy sources.
Okay, I'm seeing that happening at least a little. Solar panels are popping up everywhere, more wind farms. Are we on the right track then? Is that enough?
It's a start, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
So what else does the source say?
Well, they talk about this idea of electrifying everything, and I'm curious, what's your take on that? What comes to mind when you hear that phrase?
Electrifying everything. I guess like switching over everything that runs on fossil fuels to run on electricity instead.
Right, that's the general idea. I mean, think about it. Cars, heating systems, maybe even entire communities powered by electricity.
A complete energy overhaul.
Exactly. And that means we can't just think about swapping out gas for electric. We got to rethink how that electricity is generated and distributed. The source gets into this really fascinating concept of decentralized energy.
Decentralized energy.
Yeah, have you heard much about that?
Honestly, not really. What does it mean?
Well, basically, it means moving away from those big centralized power plants that we rely on now and moving towards smaller, more localized energy systems.
So instead of one huge power plant serving a whole region, you'd have smaller power sources scattered around.
Precisely.
Huh, interesting.
Like microgrids, for example. Ever heard of those?
Microgrids. Vaguely. Right.
Imagine like a mini power grid for your neighborhood. It can operate independently or connect to a larger grid when needed.
So if the main power grid goes down, your neighborhood can still have electricity.
That's the idea. More resilient, more reliable.
That would be incredible, especially with extreme weather events becoming.
Exactly. Climate resilience built right in.
But, okay, let's say we make that switch to renewables. We've got these microgrids and everything. Aren't we just shifting the problem if we're still wasting energy?
You're hitting on a really crucial point there.
Like, what's the point of clean energy if we're just using more and more of it?
Right. The source is really clear about this. Energy efficiency, it's got to go hand in hand with renewable energy.
It's not just about where the energy comes from, but how much we're using.
Absolutely. So all those things we hear about, LED light bulbs, smart thermostats, those aren't just feel-good measures. They actually make a big difference.
I've been meaning to switch over to LED lights. It really does matter then.
Absolutely. And the source goes even further, talking about making our homes and buildings more energy efficient, better insulation, more efficient appliances. It all adds up.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach.
Mm.
We're making our homes more efficient, switching to renewables, creating these microgrids.
Exactly. And all these pieces, they fit together.
It's all connected.
Which brings us to another really big piece of the puzzle, transportation.
Ah, yes, our cars.
Yeah, I mean, how we get around has a huge impact on the climate.
I've been trying to bike more, take public transit when I can. But I'm not going to lie, I still rely on my car a lot.
I hear you.
Does the source offer any hope for people like me who aren't ready to give up their cars entirely?
It does. And it acknowledges that it's not realistic for everyone to just ditch their car overnight. It's more about a multi-pronged approach, like we were talking about with energy.
So what are some of the prongs when it comes to transportation?
Public transportation is a big one. Imagine well-designed, efficient, and affordable bus and train systems.
I've traveled to cities with amazing public transit. It makes a huge difference.
Right. It can incentivize people to leave their cars at home more often.
But what about places where public transit isn't as developed?
The source talks about that too, encouraging what's called active transportation.
Active transportation.
Walking, biking, things like that. I think we can both agree that cities designed for pedestrians and cyclists are just more enjoyable to live in.
Absolutely. Fewer cars, less pollution, more space for people.
Exactly. But of course, we still need ways to travel long distances, carry heavy loads,
Right.
and that's where things like electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cells come in.
Okay, those are getting more popular.
And the source emphasizes that it's not just about switching to these vehicles, but also building the infrastructure to support them.
Like charging stations for electric cars and those hydrogen refueling stations I've been hearing about.
Exactly. And, there's another fascinating aspect the source brings up. It's the role that nature can play in all of this.
Wait, nature? How can nature help us solve a problem that, let's face it, is largely caused by us?
It's about recognizing that nature has these incredible uh, built-in mechanisms for regulating the climate. Forests, wetlands, oceans, they all act as these giant carbon sinks, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
So by protecting and restoring those ecosystems, we're basically enlisting nature's help in fighting climate change.
Precisely. But, and the source makes this clear, we also have to be mindful of the damage we're doing. Deforestation, habitat destruction, all of that releases carbon back into the atmosphere and weakens those natural defenses.
It's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
In a way, yeah. But the source does offer some solutions for reversing that trend. Reforestation is a big one. Planting trees, restoring those degraded ecosystems, it can really make a difference.
Large-scale tree planting, then.
Yeah.
What about on an individual level? Can we do anything in our daily lives to reduce our impact?
Absolutely. And that's where the source dives into this concept of reducing waste and moving towards a circular economy.
Circular economy.
It's about moving away from that take, make, dispose mentality and towards a system where resources are used more efficiently, reducing, reusing, recycling.
Okay, I'm trying to be better about all that, but sometimes it just feels so overwhelming. Where do you even start?
The source suggests starting small. Little changes like reducing single-use plastics, buying fewer things in general, being more mindful of what we're consuming.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I have noticed more companies using sustainable packaging these days. That's a good sign. But speaking of reducing waste, I got to ask about recycling. Are we really making a difference by diligently sorting our plastics and cardboard?
Oh, absolutely. Recycling is a crucial part of that circular economy idea.
Good to know. So those trips to the recycling bin actually matter.
They do. And the source also highlights the importance of composting, turning those food scraps into nutrient-rich soil instead of sending them to the landfill.
I've been meaning to start composting. It seems like a good step.
It is, but let's be real. Even if we're all recycling, composting, being super mindful consumers, we still need larger scale action to address this problem, right?
Right. It can't just be on individuals to fix this.
You're absolutely right. And that's where strong climate policies come in.
So government regulations, international agreements, that kind of thing. What does this source recommend?
One of the most effective policies is carbon pricing, essentially making companies pay for the carbon emissions they produce.
Putting a price on pollution, basically.
Exactly. It creates a financial incentive for them to reduce their carbon footprint.
That makes sense. And I've also heard about emissions trading systems or cap and trade programs. How do those work?
Those programs, they set a limit on the total amount of emissions allowed and then allow companies to buy and sell permits to emit greenhouse gases.
So it's like creating a market for emissions.
Precisely.
Interesting. And what about those global agreements, like the Paris Agreement? Are those making a difference?
International cooperation is absolutely essential. Agreements like the Paris Agreement, they set targets for reducing emissions and provide a framework for global collaboration.
It felt like a big deal when that was signed, but I know there's been a lot of back and forth since then. Have we actually seen a decrease in emissions?
It's true, global emissions are still rising, but the agreement has definitely spurred some progress. Countries implementing policies, investing in renewable energy.
So there's still a long way to go, but at least we've got a framework for action. But what about the role of innovation in all of this?
Ah, yes. The source talks about that too, the potential of these cutting-edge technologies to really move the needle on climate change.
Yeah, that's what I'm really curious about. Can technology be the solution?
Well, that's what we're going to explore next.
Let's dive into those innovations.
It can be, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the world of clean tech.
Okay, so spill it. What are some of these game-changing technologies that the source talks about?
Well, one that's already getting a lot of attention is carbon capture and storage. or CCS for short.
CCS, right. I've heard that term thrown around, but I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it means.
So basically, imagine capturing those carbon dioxide emissions right at the source, like from power plants or industrial facilities.
Okay, so instead of letting those emissions go into the atmosphere,
You capture them and then store them underground so they're not contributing to global warming.
underground, like where?
You can pump it into old oil wells, depleted gas reservoirs, that sort of thing. There's a lot of research going into finding safe and permanent storage options.
So we're basically trapping those emissions where they can't do any harm.
Exactly.
Huh. That's pretty wild.
It is, and it's a technology that's already being implemented in some places.
Is it safe? Pumping all that carbon underground.
That's a valid concern, of course, and the source does address those safety concerns. There are, rigorous monitoring systems and protocols in place.
Right, to make sure it stays put.
Exactly. And, any new technology comes with risks, but the potential benefits of actually removing carbon from the atmosphere, those are pretty significant.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. So what else? What other technological marvels are out there?
Well, another area that's getting a lot of buzz is green hydrogen.
Green hydrogen.
Have you heard much about that?
I've heard of hydrogen fuel cells, yeah. Those are being used in some cars and buses, right?
Right. So hydrogen is a clean burning fuel, but the way we produce it now, it often relies on fossil fuels, ironically.
Ah, okay.
So green hydrogen is different. It's produced using renewable energy sources. So you're using solar power, wind power to create hydrogen.
So it's like double clean. Clean energy making clean fuel.
Exactly. And the source suggests that, green hydrogen could really be a game changer. It could replace fossil fuels in so many applications, powering our homes, our businesses, transportation systems.
That's amazing. It's like we're on the cusp of a whole new energy era.
It does feel that way. But, and the source is careful to point this out, technology alone isn't the silver bullet.
I figured it can't be that simple.
Right. We have to address those underlying drivers of climate change, those consumption patterns, economic systems, our values even.
It's about changing our behavior, not just our technology.
Exactly. The source argues for a cultural shift, really, a move away from, that constant pursuit of more stuff towards a more sustainable way of being.
It's a pretty tall order, isn't it?
It is, but, it's not impossible.
So what can we do? Where do we even start?
Well, one of the key takeaways from the source is the importance of individual action. Every choice we make, every day, it makes a difference. The food we eat, the way we travel, the things we buy.
I've been trying to be more mindful of my choices lately, like cutting back on meat, supporting local businesses, that sort of thing.
Those are all great examples, and the source really emphasizes that even those small changes, they add up, especially when millions of people are making them.
It's that ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Like if we all start making those changes, it creates a bigger wave.
Precisely. And then, there's the power of collective action.
Right. Working together to make change happen.
Exactly. So, getting involved in our communities, advocating for policies that support sustainability, supporting those organizations that are working on solutions, it all makes a difference.
It's inspiring to see all the people who are already doing that, all the grassroots movements, the community initiatives. People are really starting to step up.
They are, and that gives me hope. There's a real global movement building, and that's incredibly powerful.
Okay, so if you could leave our listeners with one key message, what would it be?
I think it would be this. Global warming is a serious threat. There's no sugarcoating that. But it's not a hopeless situation. We have the knowledge, the tools, the creativity to solve this problem. It's going to take collective action, a willingness to change, but we can do this.
I love that. A message of hope and action. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned. We'll be back with more from Solving Global Warming, a path toward a sustainable future.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been exploring some pretty fascinating solutions for global warming today.
We have, and there's still so much to cover.
I know. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how many different approaches there are, all these interconnected pieces.
It's not just about, one single fix. The source, Solving Global Warming, a path toward a sustainable future, emphasizes that holistic approach we've been talking about.
Right. It's about transforming our entire way of life, not just making a few tweaks here and there.
Exactly.
So before the break, we were starting to get into these cutting-edge technologies.
Ah, yes. The innovations that could really change the game. And I have to admit, the one that really caught my attention was direct air capture. Is that technology really as promising as it sounds?
It's definitely a fascinating field. The source dives into some detail about how it works. You're basically developing these giant machines that, well, they act like air filters. They scrub that carbon dioxide right out of the atmosphere.
So we're talking about like cleaning up the mess we've already made, not just preventing future emissions.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so let's say we can capture that carbon. What do we do with it then?
Well, one option is to store it underground. Sequester it so it's not contributing to global warming.
Underground. Like bury it.
Essentially, yeah, you can pump it into those depleted oil wells, underground caverns, that sort of thing.
Huh. Is that safe?
The source talks about the safety protocols involved, the monitoring systems. It's definitely something that's taken very seriously.
Makes sense.
And, any new technology has risks, but the potential benefits of actually removing carbon from the atmosphere, it's pretty compelling.
I see what you mean. It's a trade-off.
Right.
So what about those other uses for captured carbon? I've heard about, like, turning it into building materials.
The source mentions that too, utilizing that captured carbon in industrial processes, or even converting it into useful products.
So what was once pollution could actually become a resource.
Exactly. Pretty amazing, right?
It is. Okay, so direct air capture, that's one big innovation. What else is out there?
Well, we were talking about green hydrogen before the break,
Right, clean fuel.
produced using renewable energy. So it's a truly clean fuel source.
And the source suggests that green hydrogen could have a pretty big impact, right?
Absolutely. The potential is huge. It could replace fossil fuels in so many ways: transportation, powering our homes, industry.
It really does feel like we're on the brink of this whole new era.
It does, but, and the source makes this point very clearly, technology can't be the only answer.
I knew you were going to say that.
We can't just, invent our way out of this problem.
Yeah.
We have to address those deeper issues, the way we consume, the way our economies work, our values even.
It's that cultural shift we were talking about earlier, right?
Exactly. Moving towards a more sustainable way of life.
A more mindful way of living.
Precisely. So, yes, technology is exciting, but it's only part of the solution.
Okay, so if you had to boil down the source's message, what would you say are the key takeaways? What do people need to remember?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the power of individual action. Every choice we make matters. What we buy, what we eat, how we travel, it all adds up.
I've definitely been trying to be more conscious of those choices.
And those individual actions, they ripple outwards, They influence others, they send a message, and then, of course, there's the power of collective action.
Right, working together to demand change, supporting those organizations that are fighting for a better future.
Exactly. It's about raising our voices, getting involved in our communities, making our votes count.
It can feel overwhelming, but it's also empowering,
Yeah.
knowing that we can make a difference.
Absolutely. And, the source really leaves us with a sense of hope. It's not sugarcoating the challenge. Global warming is serious, but it also makes it clear that we're not powerless. We have the knowledge, the tools, the ingenuity to solve this.
We can do this.
We can, if we work together.
Well, that's a great note to end on, a message of hope and action.
It is.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into solving global warming, a path toward a sustainable future. It's been an incredible conversation.
It really has. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Remember, every action counts. Let's all do our part to create a brighter, more sustainable future.